GDPR was a very seminal, significant moment, and that has been followed by a wave, right? CCPA, APAC, GDPL, FDPR, all these different standards around the world. How does that influence? In the old days, you had privacy said that what you wanted to do. Now we've got more guidance, right, and more rules around what we have to account for from a privacy policy perspective, and then our ability to kind of enforce that. So, a couple things. What are some of the key tenets of privacy that people need to be aware of? And then also, as we're looking at, oh my God, I got to comply with all these rules. How common are they, right? Is complying with one largely complying with the other, or are they so disparate that it becomes 5 efforts, not one?
Yeah, and that's a huge challenge for multinationals, right? So there are some common themes, and we've touched upon those actually earlier on. This idea of putting the individual at the center and recognizing the dignity that you need to attach to that individual's information, because it relates to a core aspect of who they are. So once that's understood, how do you do that? And there's certain requirements around transparency, giving notice, ensuring consent of individuals to what's being done around their data, ensuring adequate security over information, ensuring that there is accountability within the organization. And this is this idea of tone from the top, and also an acceptance of responsibility of what's happening within the organization right from the top down. So those threads of accountability, transparency, notice, consent, common through lots of different privacy frameworks. But ultimately also what has to be understood is the local nuances. So, we have a saying at HewardMills, you sort of think globally, act locally on privacy. And that's, have a global approach, but you must understand that there will be local requirements that you also need to be cognizant of. And even across Europe, the cultural differences mean that in specific jurisdictions, there are different approaches taken by the supervisory authorities. And what the GDPR is a baseline. Okay. Right? And there will be certain jurisdictions that will go over that baseline in terms of requirements. You need to understand what they are and meet compliance with them.
Gotcha.
And a typical example, and one obviously that we're very familiar with, is obviously the requirement to have a data protection officer, a DPO. So that's set out in the GDPR, and certain organizations will have a mandatory obligation to have one. But the criteria for appointing may vary across different jurisdictions. So, in Germany, if you have over 20 employees, then the obligation could be triggered based on the types of processing that you're engaged with. That will differ, across European jurisdictions. And you need to have an understanding of what those local requirements are if you're operating across various jurisdictions.
Gotcha.
But ultimately, taking a high standard like the GDPR across your organization, if you're a multinational, is a good strategy.